So, hey, man, it's really cool to have you guys here today, and you are all in for a special treat. My friend Dan Herod is here this morning. He's going to share the word with us. Dan is our Youth Alive director for our district, meaning I'm not sure what 2020 looked like, but in 2019, he would travel to high schools all over our state, encouraging and connecting with students, trying to help them as they move forward in their walk with the Lord, and also just impacting them, doing motivational programming and assemblies and things like that. Dan is also a volunteer first responder in his community, so I love that Dan he kind of embraces our mindset, and our mantra is like we live it out our other 6 days. It's not something he has to do, it's something he chooses to do because he wants to serve and be involved. But all of that said, Dan's really cool, but the part that I love the most about Dan is, y'all know kind of my story a little bit when I was fired from my church in Sheboygan that I was at, and then I took like a year off before I came here. You know, when you go through moments like that, there's a lot of times where you just want to cash it in and quit, and you're done. Dan would consistently call me during that season just to check in and say, hey, man, how you doing? I'm praying for you, which is pretty phenomenal to me because Dan himself is acquainted well with suffering. It wasn't but a year, I think, before that we were at a small little casket as he said goodbye to his little daughter who had died. And so he's somebody who understands suffering but has the ability to speak to hearts in that season. So I'm thankful for him to come today. I know there's many of you here. I look at you. This last year was a hard year for a lot of us. It's my prayer today that his words will encourage and bring, I don't even want to say it wrong, and I will if I try to do it. It's not necessarily comfort. It is insight, and I think insight. I'm not even going to say understanding because some of our suffering makes no sense, right? It's insight, and it is wisdom in difficult situations. So would you welcome my friend Dan? You see that little blue box?
Okay. Hey, good morning, Connection Church. I'm excited to be back. It's been a few years, and I love to bring my family with me when I speak, and so I'm going to show you pictures. Hopefully that's okay. I'm going to show you me and Marlena. We've been married for 18 years. We celebrated the big 1-8 in August, and we are at that really cool stage in our lives where we've known each other longer than we've not known each other. And so at this point, we are finishing each other's sandwiches, and those of you who like Frozen will find that funny. Those of you who've never seen it, you'll be a little bit confused, but I still, in real life, I also finish sometimes the leftovers that she doesn't finish at mealtimes. We've got great kids. Our oldest is Logan. He is 13. He likes playing piano and PlayStation 4. He's a well-rounded dude. And regularly, he completely owns me in Call of Duty. And it's my humbling hour, like just regular intervals. We set that appointment, and he just reminds me that he's way better than me at the PlayStation than I would like to be. And this little ball of sass standing next to him, her name is Camden. She is 17. Anybody else have a child in your life and you're like, oh, I know exactly what you're saying, Dan. Yeah, she's 17. And let me just tell you, she is pure joy. She just brings so much life and perspective into our world. And on the daily, she gets us laughing hysterically. And she likes to tell dad jokes. And I'm like, making my heart proud. Like, and one of her favorites is, like, why did the stormtrooper buy the iPhone? Because he couldn't find the droid he was looking for. Somebody put your hands together, like that's a good dad joke. I mean, come on, my 7-year-old girl has comedic timing and knows how to drop a good dad joke. I'm bursting with joy over this little girl, and we as a family are committed to this one idea, and that is this: every student matters. For 10 years, coming up on 11 years, we've been serving as Youth Alive missionaries to Wisconsin and Northern Michigan, and that one thought, that within minutes of this building, there are students between grades 6 and 12 who are going through some of the most tumultuous times in our recent cultural history. If you can reflect back to when you were 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, reflect back to how that felt. And then look at how this generation of students is experiencing life. 2020, as someone else said it way funnier than I did, 2020 was the longest decade I ever lived through in my entire life. It felt like it just wouldn't end. So can you picture being a teenager in the midst of the coronavirus? Can you picture being in the season of racial unrest that we're still in, and then the presidential election really divided, or revealed, I should say that, it revealed the divisions in our country. So imagine being a teenager going through that and then being forced to quarantine. So what are we going to do? And I say we because this is our time to shine. This is our season for us. If you follow Jesus Christ, you've got a purpose for this second. You've got a divine design on your life that God has released you into your sphere of influence so you could reflect His glory, so you could be an ambassador of healing, so you could shine. And so what are we going to do as the church? We can't wait for students to show up here. We can't. We've got to run into their world with hope, with healing, with encouragement, with truth. And one of the ways that Youth Alive gets to do this is through school assemblies. We get to work with some of the best communicators in the nation, some even the world. And this team of speakers you're about to see up on the screen, some of them travel Australia, Africa, Asia. These gentlemen are committed to helping everybody that they have the privilege of communicating to understand that their life has inherent worth and immutable value. Now, I don't know if you can remember, but there was a time where coronavirus wasn't here. Anybody else remember that? Wasn't it awesome? It was great. I was there, you were there, promise. And so, what were we doing before the pandemic hit? Well, on January 24th of just last year, we were at Oshkosh Traeger Middle School with my friend Terrence Talley. And he's sharing his message with 400 middle school students in a gymnasium, shoulder to shoulder, which sounds odd now because now we're like, can you be shoulder to shoulder? But that's the way it was. 400 students shoulder to shoulder in a gymnasium, and Terrence is encouraging them. He's saying, don't give up. Your life has worth. Don't give up. You matter to me and to the teachers and to the students in this room. Don't give up. And at the end of his encouragement, he invites teachers down front, and he invites students to go get a hug from a teacher. And I've seen that moment over 100 times personally, and I get emotional every single time because students are weeping because they know what it's like to receive attention, but they don't always know what it's like to receive affection. And one of the reasons why, and I'm not downing technology, one of the reasons why is the glowing rectangle that is sitting in most of our pockets right now. Just by a show of hands, on average, how many times do you think the average American checks their cell phone? Do you believe it's more than 25? Raise your hand. Okay, do you believe it's more than 50? Raise your hand. Do you believe it's more than 75? Raise your hand. I'm just loving this woman in this row here. Her hand is not dropped. She's like, I'm just going to wait for him to get to 3,000, then I'm going to drop my hand. She's right. She's absolutely right. 90 times a day is the average number of check-ins we have with the glowing rectangle. Some age groups, it's actually 150. So we've got a generation now of students who haven't reached emotional maturity or even intellectual maturity. And that's not a slam, that's a fact. My brain didn't fully mature until I was in my mid-20s. Ladies, you have an advantage. You get there sooner. But why are we giving a tool that is a virtual trip to Las Vegas to a generation who have yet to cultivate the emotional maturity and the intellectual maturity to use the tool and prevent the tool from using them? Now, I just turned 40 last week, and at 40 years old, I have a problem managing my usage on my cell phone. Can you imagine being 14? That's just ironic. I love that. For those of you watching online, there's a phone ringing right now. So if me, an adult, if I have issues regulating my own smartphone usage, how much more does a generation of students who have yet to cultivate discipline, how much more do we need as the church to come alongside of them, to encourage them, to equip them, to resource them, to be an incarnation of the truth, that there's a better life that is made possible by a greater love, and his name is Jesus. So now picture this. January 24th, we're back in Oshkosh with Terrence Talley. Students are flooding out of their seats, weeping, hugging teachers. And a young man comes up to Terrence, and he's weeping, and he hugs Terrence, and he goes, "Thank you." He walks away. Wasn't the end of the story, though, because he messages Terrence moments later. He says, 2 weeks ago, my mom found the firearm that I had acquired to make the final choice. And I'm being very intentionally vague on the mechanism, intentionally. But he bought a gun to make a choice you can't unmake. Is everybody tracking? He's in 8th grade. How does an 8th grader do that? Why does an 8th grader do that? That should be the question that's more vexing to us. Because you can chase fires all day long, or you can work to prevent fires from happening. This young man's life was on fire. And his mom found the gun and took it. She saved his life. Was he thankful? No. He was furious. And he told Terrence this. He goes, "I was so mad at my mom for saving my life." Pause. How deep does your darkness have to be that you're mad at your rescuer? Think about that. How deep do the corners and the recesses of the depression have to be where you're mad that somebody helped you live? That would be like me as a volunteer firefighter, which, by the way, is the most legitimate excuse I have as a full-grown man to ride on fire trucks. Hey, parades are fun. I can wave like a banshee. I am really good at waving, okay? But that would be like me and my team entering a building that's on fire. Flames are shooting out of the second story windows. Smoke is filling the clouds above the roof line. And we rescue somebody. We pull them out of the house. And then they start cussing us out. And we're like, what's the deal? What gives here? And they're like, "Why'd you save me?" And we're like, "Well, because your house is on fire." That's the emotional state of this young man. Let that sit for just a second. Because, dare I say, there are people in this room and watching online right now. That's you. And I have to say this. Please hear me. You're worth the rescue. You're worth the rescue. Jesus didn't leave heaven, come to earth, to even leave one behind. So if that's you today, please reach out for help. Because nobody can read your mind. Nobody is able to do that. You're worth the rescue. So this young man tells Terrence, "I was mad at my mom, but after you came and told me to never give up, I'm thankful for my mom." In 50 minutes, that's all it took. 50 minutes, Youth Alive, Terrence Talley showing up to his middle school, sharing a mental health message, encouraging students with the truth. His heart flipped from despair, loneliness, depression. I want to live. 50 minutes. I want to show you a picture of where we've been since 2010. We've reached over 221,000 students with our programming during the day. 221,000 lives have been reached by Youth Alive and by Connection Church. Because every month, this church faithfully invests into our mission. We can't do that without help. And so thank you for giving your dollar sacrificially. Instead of taking your $5 and going to Starbucks, you take your $5 and you invest it into missions and you help students live. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I do want you to find us online. We are on the Facebook and the Instagram, which is just not a fast-moving grandma, just so you know, it's a social media platform. So find us there, and then make sure you stop by the table on the way out. Sign up for our e-newsletter. Stay in the know there. Youth Alive is able to do what we do because of you. Without your help, without your prayers, without your generous financial investment into what we do, those 221,000 students they're not reached. They're not. But here's my hope. We'll see that number increase in the days, weeks, and months and years ahead. Why? Because we got more work to do. Pastor Chris has generously allowed me to share a devotional thought. And so I'd like to have a quick conversation with you about 2 lies that I believe are crippling us when we walk through difficult seasons of life. And as he mentioned, he and Belinda were there the day that we had to say goodbye to our daughter, who on November 30th in 2011, at 13 months old, she was at the doctor for a checkup. And her pediatrician looked Marlena right in the eyes and said, "Your daughter's perfect." Marlena laid Peyton down for a nap that afternoon, and she never woke up. She passed away of SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And that thrust my family and I onto a path that we still to this day, we do not want to be on, but you only have one life to live, and no one can walk out of their own story. You have to live your story. So here we are, we're doing our best to live our story. And people would say all kinds of interesting things to us after our daughter passed. Have you ever heard this one? God would never give you more than you could handle. Anybody? Like, weren't you tempted to give them more than they can handle? like, and I'm not God. Haha, therefore I can give you more than you can handle. Ta-da! Like, why do we believe this idea? Why? I think this is crippling us. Because follow the logic. What happens to me if, well, I'll just use my example. My daughter passes away. I enter severe depression. I medicate unhealthy. My coping mechanisms are destroying things that I love and people I love. If I believe God would never allow me to go through more than I can handle, what happens to me in my relationship with God? Because the untrue correlation is everything that happens is what you can handle. That is not true. My parents divorced when I was 2 years old. My mom didn't get custody. My dad got full custody because she has some mental health issues that made her unable to care for us because she needed to focus on caring for herself. So that put me on a path of brokenness. If I believed that wasn't more than I can handle, how does that make me feel about God? That actually makes me feel like I'm weak. Because if God allows it, well, surely I'm strong enough. False. That is an untrue landing point. What does Jesus say about it? Because it's wise to let him speak through the scriptures, through the Holy Spirit, through the people of God. And this is what he says in John chapter 16, verse 33. He says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this life you will have lazy boys, Cheetos, Mountain Dews, flush bank accounts. Is that what Jesus says? Oh, in this life your relatives will never annoy you. Is that what Jesus says? In this life, your boss will always respect you. Or in this life, your spouse will never, ever snore while you're sleeping and trying to rest. Is that what Jesus says? In this life, you will have, let's just say the word, trouble. And that word trouble is just a fancy way of saying, ouchie mama. Right? So Jesus says, buckle up, Betty, and hang on, Hank. It's about to get bumpy. Life is going to be tough. So if the Savior of the universe comes down from heaven to earth and he tells his friends, the disciples, and now because you and I follow Christ, he tells you and I this, in this life you're going to have trouble. Ouch. And then he gives us really good news. But take heart, who? Jesus. Jesus has overcome the world. So here's the truth. God will never give you more than he can handle. That matters. God will never allow you to go through more than he can handle. And looking back on my life, that is 100% true. The divorce of my parents, more than I can handle, not more than he can handle. The loss of my daughter, more than I can handle, not more than he can handle. I even went through a stretch where I had Bell's palsy, where half my face went on strike. It was crazy. I didn't know if I was having a stroke or what, but I was trying to watch the movie Avatar. If you've never seen Avatar, let me help you. Take the plot line from Dances with Wolves, 1990s epic with Kevin Costner. Then add super-sized alien Smurfs. You have just seen Avatar. You're welcome. Like, that's the whole movie. You've just seen it, except the special effects are amazing in the movie. And so I'm trying to watch the movie, and my face goes on strike. And for 5 months, I hated my reflection. For 5 months, I couldn't focus in conversations with people because I was so focused on the fact that they were looking at Quasimodo. I felt hideous. That was more than I could handle. What did that allow me to do? Run to the one who can handle it. I mean, we all have these moments where we get close to someone who is stronger than us, and then just by proximity, we are stronger because we're closer to them. You know what I'm talking about? For me, that was my dad. We had this one moment growing up. I lived in an apartment my entire life until I graduated high school. And outside of our apartment complex, we would play this game called Cops and Robbers. And we'd be on bikes and we'd be flying back and forth. It was so much fun. And I was standing next to the sidewalk where the kids were running their bikes up and down. And this kid named Bobby flies by me. His foot slips off his pedal. His rear end crashes down onto his bike seat and it shatters because it was that plastic bike seat. Splinters and shards are flying everywhere. And everyone's like, whoa, Bobby just broke his bike seat. So here's what happens. Bobby runs upstairs and tells his mom that I broke his bike seat. Within minutes, I hear this hurricane coming around the corner. And she is yelling at me, threatening to sue me, which is the most ridiculous thing. Looking back, I'm like, that's funny, ma'am. I would like to see you on the people's court. And like, just think about that. You're going to sue a 12-year-old for breaking your son's bike seat. This is ridiculous. But I was terrified because I didn't understand that she was being ridiculous. So now I go up to my apartment. I'm like, Dad, this happened. And it's kind of cool because I was using sign language to communicate because he is deaf, and that's the way it was. So now my dad, he walks straight up to her apartment, and like he's in front of me, and I'm behind him, and I'm feeling like super big and super strong. And he like knocks on the door. Like, pause. What is a deaf person supposed to do with a hearing person that he's got beef with? Think about that. That's how awesome my dad is. Like, he didn't care. And we knew they were home because they were whisper yelling behind the door. You know what I'm talking about? You guys have these friends. You're at the movie and they're whisper yelling to you the entire time. And if you don't have a friend who whisper yells, you are the friend who whisper yells. Okay? She never opened the door. She never opened the door. My dad was able to handle that. God is able to handle all that you walk through. And when you let his word reveal that truth to you, you're going to find strength for each day because you realize I don't have to have the strength for the day. Jesus already has that. So I'm going to walk with him. He's got me. I'm trusting that it's going to be good in the end, not in the middle, not in the moment, but in the end, it's going to be good, which brings me to my second lie that I want to destroy today in regards to suffering, and that is this. Everything happens for a reason. You ever heard that? Boy, that puts 2020 in a funky light, doesn't it? That implies that God is causing everything to happen for a reason. And if you believe that, it's really hard to pray to a God who causes you nothing but pain. We have to let the Bible speak and inform us that in the book of Genesis, the beginning of the story of humanity, God creates Adam, he creates Eve, he sets them up in perfection, he puts this tree, it's called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he's like, Adam, Eve, listen, you can have all of that, but do not touch this. If you eat of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will die. It will not end well for you. But what did Adam and Eve do? They ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Even after God's like, Adam, you listening? Yeah, do not eat of the fruit. Okay. Like he just didn't get it. For whatever reason. And here's the deeper narrative there. The serpent, who is emblematic of the devil, got Adam and Eve to question God's goodness. That's why they did what they did. And if you reflect back on your journey, I'll just put myself in the mix. Some of my worst decisions in my walk with Jesus have come when I allowed the question of God's goodness to become an action step. And so Adam and Eve chose to do what they did. Did God cause them to do that? No. Why didn't he take the tree out? Here's why. Because he wants to have a real love. And you can't have a real love without a real choice. So God, desiring them to be able to choose him, had to set it up so they could not choose him. Because is it really a choice if you can't decide? So, did God cause that to happen? No. But through one willful decision, creation fell. Now, through second willful decision, Jesus, in the book of Romans, we see him as the second Adam. And he is putting all things back together. So God did not ordain the fall of creation, but he does redeem it. There's a verse that I want to encourage you to read, if not memorize, and it's Romans 8:28. And so we're just going to read this out loud together in this room. Here we go. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That verse is so encouraging to me because it says that God causes all things to work together. And I've seen it. Growing up in a home where my parents were divorced, God's redeemed that and given me greater compassion for those with growing up in broken homes. Growing up with a dad who is deaf, and the difficulties were immense, but God's redeemed that. And now I have an ability to understand people in ways that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Walking through the loss of my daughter. I'll just say it this way. Before Peyton passed, heaven was a place I believed in. Now it's a place I want to be. Because the promise of the gospel is even though we may die, we will still yet live. That's how powerful God is. Not even death itself has the ability to end your story. Your story is eternal because of what Jesus did. And then, on a lighter note, having Bell's palsy taught me that looks don't matter near as much as I thought they did. We've allowed in America a superficial understanding of what beauty is. The gospel says your worth is rooted in who you were created to be. Because the Creator has ordained your worth. You may have heard the example, but if someone were to hand you a $100 bill that was crumpled up and stained, would you take it? Why? Because it's still worth $100. And sometimes life has a way to crumple us up and mark us, but it doesn't change us in our value and our worth. So what does this scripture tell us about God? He does not make everything happen for a reason. He gives a purpose to everything that happens. And the difference is dynamic. If you can understand that God is going to give a purpose to your pain, you can keep walking. You can keep breathing. You can keep making it through. I don't know if you've ever heard the thought that time heals all wounds. Anybody ever heard that before? It is a bald-faced lie. Because if that were true, you would never meet a bitter senior citizen. I'm not throwing shade at people with years on their life, because there's a difference between a senior citizen and a seasoned citizen. My goal is to be a seasoned citizen with so many wrinkles in my face as I smile that I can't even count them. And even less hair. Isn't that going to be fun? I'm going to be a seasoned citizen. And a seasoned citizen chooses to get better when life has given them enough excuses to choose to be bitter. So time does not heal all wounds. What you do with that time can heal everything. Starts off with who do you bring your heart to? Because we all dwell at the well that refreshes us. Jesus is the wellspring of life. Please hear me. People are going to fail you, and you're even going to fail yourself. Jesus never fails. His love never fails. And so start there. Who you bring your pain to determines how you heal. After my daughter died, I poured myself into work. I poured myself into work. I poured myself into work. Why? Because I was angry. I was in pain. I was just livid that my beautiful girl was gone. So I was like, I'm never standing still again, because if I stand still, I'm going to feel the pain. I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going. I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. Here's the problem with red line living. The system fails eventually. My wife, on the other hand, she didn't get out of bed for 3 months after our daughter passed away. Notice the difference between us. My default setting was I'm just going to put the pedal to the metal and I'm just going to work myself into exhaustion. Her response to pain was, I can't even breathe. I can't even move. I don't want to try today. And our marriage got so much better after we honored the difference between us. What do I mean? I was trying to get her to heal my way, and she was trying to get me to heal her way. And it created tension. And it wasn't until we honored the difference, and let me explain what is honor. It is you give deference in the area of your preference. That's honor. You would prefer something done this way, but because of honoring the other, you defer to them. It doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong. And in marriage, when you honor your spouse, that is love. Even though you would prefer them to chew with their mouths closed. I'm just kidding. No, you need to prefer that. That's okay. But how you respond to pain, specifically in relationships, matters. Because you don't want to unwittingly pour pain onto someone you love. And any trauma that's not transformed by the grace of God gets transferred onto those we love. So before you leave this room today and before you're done watching online, I want to invite you to open your heart, to allow the grace of God to begin the work of transformation. Because he loves you. When I was in the 8th grade, I was playing basketball with some friends. I was a terrible basketball player, but there was a cute girl there. So I'm like, I'm a good basketball player today. And so I'm driving the lane, and I shoot, and I get tripped, and I land on my back, and I herniate a disc in my back. And it felt like I had lightning going down both my legs, and it was months until I finally had surgery to fix it. March 3rd of my 8th grade year, one day after my birthday that year, I went under the knife to fix my back. And I woke up in the recovery room, was wheeled into my long-term room. And within hours, a nurse walks in and said the meanest thing to me. You want to know what she said? Get up. And I'm like, get behind me, Satan. Like, what is wrong with you? Don't you understand that my back feels like it is one big ball of ache? She said, no, get up. Like, She goes, if you don't get up, you risk making it worse. There is a wisdom to waiting to move. And there's a wisdom to knowing when it's time to move. And I didn't get up out of that bed by myself. I needed help. So there's a wisdom in trusting others to help you. And that nurse and her team helped me sit up, very slowly, I might add, helped me stand up on the edge of the bed, and I grabbed that IV pole, did my waddle lap around the floor, got back to my bed, I sat down, and they slowly lowered me horizontally, helped my legs get back, and I was like, oh. And you want to know what she did? Like, the next day, she did it again. But I was stronger the next day because I got up on the previous day. And there's a progressive healing that happens in our lives when we just take the small steps. Too often, we try and run a marathon before we maybe run around the block. So I cannot stress enough how important it is. If you aren't following Jesus yet, I implore you to consider his claims in the Gospels. Please, at least give Jesus a shot. If you are following Jesus, I have to believe that there's pain in this room. There's pain of those of us watching online. He sees you, hears you, and he loves you. The divorce wasn't what you wanted, but it is what happened. God did not ordain that, but he will redeem that. Your son or daughter who has walked away from the faith, God did not ordain that, but he will redeem that. So whatever you're walking through today, make room for Jesus. So first, just in this room and those of you watching online, if you're in this space and you're ready to start walking with Jesus, to test his claims, to see if he's the real deal, today's a great day to start. I'm going to invite you to go public by reaching out to somebody in your row. And if you're watching online, to reach out to somebody who's connected to this church, to say, where do I begin? Would you stand with me, please? Two lies that we shine some light on and then deconstruct it today. God would never give you more than you can handle. That is not true. God will never give you more than he can handle. That is true. Second lie, everything happens for a reason. False. God does not make everything happen for a reason. He gives a purpose to everything that happens. So as you leave today, walk in his power. Oh, hear me. You're going to meet somebody this afternoon who you've been divinely appointed to speak life over, whether it's in person or maybe you're going to use your glowing rectangle and you're going to text them a message and say, hey, today when that dude named Dan was talking, you came to mind. And I just wanted to let you know that I think you're great. You are God's first thought for Manitowoc. God has positioned you in your workplace. He's positioned you in your family. He's positioned you in this community to make his light shine. So walk bold, walk strong, walk confident. Lastly, but not leastly, may the Lord bless you. May he keep you. And may his face shine forever brightly upon you. As we conclude, we're going to stay in this atmosphere for just a few minutes. If you would love prayer, I'm here. I would love to pray with you. If you want to sit and pray with the Lord, that's good. If you're ready to head out, man, why don't you hug somebody next to you? If you're comfortable with that, high five them, tell them they're awesome. This officially concludes the end of our time today. Connection Church, you're amazing.